are devastating.
And joining me now is former Israeli ambassador to the U.S., Michael Oren. Ambassador, thank you so much for being with us. We appreciate it, as always. What's your response to what Vice President Kamala Harris had to say there?
Good to be with you, Jim, as always. But of course, these images are painful for us as well. Israel doesn't want to see Palestinian suffering. And it's important to note, and I wish the vice president had noted, that we're dealing with an enemy who's hiding behind these civilians all the time and using them as human shields. Even as Palestinians have fled the combat zones, Hamas has fled with them and continues to use them as human shields. So Israel will continue to exercise extreme caution. I think it's further than probably any army on earth, whether it be sending text messages, leafleting, urging these Palestinians to get out of the way of fire. It is extremely difficult. They are literally, for Hamas, they're moving targets. And I know that there are people in the administration who do appreciate that, and we will continue to exercise that caution to the greatest degree possible. Keep in mind, we also have to guard the lives of our soldiers. They're precious to us.
And Ambassador, I do want to talk to you about, I guess, some of the the lengths that you're going to try to get Palestinians out of harm's way. But I guess, first of all, there was a collapse in the talks that were going on between Israel, Hamas, other parties, with regard to the plight of the hostages that are still being held in Gaza. What's your sense of where things stand right now? How do we get those talks going again so we can see more hostages coming out?
Well, the one key issue is the women and children. Israel claims that we claim that they still have 13, at least 13, as many as 17 women and children are held hostage. Hamas says they have no more. I would doubt that. Again, I'm not an official spokesman, Jim, but I've heard from official sources that there's a fear that Hamas won't let out women who have been raped multiple times, so they won't come out and tell about the rapes, and that's going to be very, very painful. Israel has to maintain the pressure on Hamas. Remember, these negotiations happened to begin with only for one reason, and that's because Israel ramped up the pressure, the military pressure, on Hamas. So we'd be able to get these hostages out so far successfully because of that pressure. We have to continue it. And meanwhile, we're witnessing these surreal situations. You know, the rockets that you just saw have just been several of more than 10,000 rockets that have been fired at Israel. Many of those rockets in Tel Aviv go literally over my house in southern Tel Aviv, and we have an Iron Dome just to the east of us. Those batteries take out those rockets right over our heads. Iron Dome is 90% effective. That means every 100 rockets that go through, 10 break through that net and they land. They knocked out an entire apartment building next to my house a while ago. So it's quite deadly. And then you have these people protesting and demonstrating in support of the hostages. I think that encapsulates all the horror of this war and the terrible decisions that the Israeli government has to make.
Yeah. Israel's military says it's carried out more than 400 strikes in the first 24 hours since the truce with Hamas ended. We know that the Hamas Ministry of Health is not exactly your most trusted source, but they say since Friday, close to 200 people have been killed, hundreds more wounded. If you're telling people, if you told people at the beginning of all of this to move to the south to get out of harm's way, and now you're trying to drop leaflets and send texts and so on to get people out of harm's way in the south, isn't there the likelihood that civilians won't get those messages or may not have somewhere to go because they've already relocated to the south and will be in harm's way when that bombardment starts in that part of Gaza? Isn't that just something that's likely to take place?
Well, we're doing our best. Again, it is a complex combat situation where Hamas is using these people as human shields. We're trying to move them from safe areas away from places where the Air Force is liable to strike or the ground forces are liable to intervene. Hamas has used these pauses, these ceasefires, to move terrorists from the north to the south in order to keep those terrorists behind the human shield as it has moved as well. And keep in mind, for Israel, this is an existential battle. It's not as if we really have a choice, Jim. We have 250,000 people who are homeless tonight. They can't go back to their homes along the border as long as Hamas could reorganize, rearm, and restage another raid, such as that. It's the attack of October 7th. That is precisely what Hamas leaders say they're going to do. They're not even going to disguise their intention. We have to stop them and release the hostages. There's not a lot of wiggle room here. And, you know that in my background, I'm a historian. I can't think in history any government that had to make decisions like this. There's no shortcut. There's no easy way. but Israel has to defeat Hamas. It has to do its best to retrieve the hostages, all the while, and I stress all the while, trying to minimize civilian casualties on the Palestinian side.
And Ambassador, I have to get your response to this New York Times report that says that Israel knew about Hamas's plan to attack more than a year ago. Obviously, perhaps the date was not known, but there were a great number of details in that planning information that went to, or that was obtained by Israeli intelligence officials. What was your response to that? I mean, did you hit the roof when you saw this report? Did that just?
No, I wasn't. The truth.
What did you make of that? Did it surprise you at all that some of these warnings were dismissed?
No, it didn't. I'll tell you the truth. There was an interesting report, and having been in government a long time, lived in the military a long time, I know that military intelligence is an imperfect science. There are many, many estimates. I'll never forget in 2011, our intelligence and American intelligence said that Bashar al-Assad would only remain 2 months in power, and he's still around today, 12 years later. Or when America recognized Jerusalem as Israel's capital, all the estimates was that the Middle East would go up in flames, and in fact, nothing happened. So it's an imperfect science, and it is very important to check and certainly investigate later who was the highest ranking officer to read this report, and if it wasn't passed on, why it wasn't passed on. It could be that people said, well, this is an interesting report, but we really don't think Hamas has this type of capability to mount this. As they said, it's aspirational, it's a dream. I think what's more disturbing for me reading it is why it was leaked and who leaked it. And already we're seeing the beginnings of political struggles in Israel about who is responsible for October 7th, whether it be the government, particularly the prime minister, and or the army. And I asked myself, okay, whose interest was it to leak this document? Who's it trying to make look bad? And I haven't come to a conclusion answer about that. But certainly when you leak a document of this type of sensitivity, a highly classified document to a news organization like the New York Times, there's got to be a reason behind it. The rest of it will be investigated, as will many other failures of October 7th.
All right, Ambassador Michael Oren, thank you very much for your time. We appreciate it.
Always, Jim. Good to be with you.
Thank you. Coming up, former President Donald Trump.